Today, we were headed for one of the most historic cities of the Languedoc-Roussillon region, Carcassonne. Famous for its medieval city and fortress, this destination also offers a beautiful town to explore, as well as a plethora of tasty foods to try. Across the moat and inside the fortress walls, we would be learning about the medieval time period in a new and exciting way as we traverse the chambers and ramparts of this unforgettable place. There would also be some shopping amidst the stalls of artisan wares and braving entry into an unusual little hole in the wall. Welcome to Carcassonne. It is only a short train ride from Béziers to Carcassonne, so it was still morning when we arrived. After dropping off our luggage at our Airbnb, we set off across the 1359 bridge to begin investigating the Villa Bassa, or Lower Town, and eventually the medieval cité itself. With the exception of a construction crew hard at work, the village was calm and quiet. There were very few tourists here and plenty of colorful old houses to admire. Having seen a bakery on the way in, we decided to take one of our famous detours and stop in to browse the selection and have our first taste of food from Carcassonne. As a note, all of the food dishes we tried in this area were superb. We enjoyed sitting in the warm sunshine while munching on our sweet pastries and sipping our hot chocolate and coffee. Continuing our journey through the village, we began to see more and more evidence of the historic nature of this area. The Villa Bassa was actually founded in 1240 by rebels that were banished from the citadel, and it seems they set up camp quite close by to the fortress, as it was only a matter of minutes before we had arrived at the top of the hill and were standing at the base of the stronghold. Being one of the top tourist destinations of France, this site draws around 3 million visitors each year. It was definitely more crowded than the village, but due to it being shoulder season, we were able to navigate away from the main population of tourists before long. We also did some shopping inside the walls, claiming for ourselves a pair of sheepskin slippers and a few other items to bring home as gifts. The first section that we covered was the inside of the castle. There are a few different passes and tours that you can take while here. We chose to minimize the time we spent touring the inside and our documentation of it, and traverse more of the outside with our pass. As it was nearing 2 o'clock, we stopped for lunch in between exploring the interior and exterior of the cité. Mama ordered something different than me, but I don't remember what because I was so enamored with my dish of cassoulet, the region's famous and rich-tasting dish containing meat and white haricot beans. Next, it was off to the ramparts. The hill upon which the city now stands was occupied as early as 500 BC. The Celtiberian people appear to have been the first ones to establish a castle here. When the Romans conquered Gaul in 100 BC, they expanded and strengthened the fortifications. Carcassonne endured a few different attempted and successful takeovers between then and 752 AD. The basilica was built between 1096 and 1150 by the Viscounts of Carcassonne and Béziers, and around 1125 the Château Comtal was added to the fortress. In 1247, the properties of the Viscounts were confiscated by the royal crown during the Albigensian Wars. Between then and the 16th century, certain parts of the fortress were replaced with Gothic art and structures, and stained glass was also added. Between then and the 16th century, certain parts of the fortress were replaced with Gothic art and structures, and stained glass was also added. The outer ramparts were built during the reign of Louis X and his son Philip III. Towers and turrets were also added at this time. During Philip's reign, the inner wall was also beautified through the addition of the Narbonnaise Gate, the only entry into the cité by way of the road. In 1659, Carcassonne was left to decay. It wasn't until 1844 that an architect began to reconstruct and recover the citadel. This work continued until the 1960s, and today there are around 1,000 inhabitants that live within the city. Once again, it seems as if you've stepped into history when you enter this place. You almost expect a wave of arrows to come sailing over the wall and guards to come tramping through the towers, armored with plated steel and chainmail. It's a storyteller's dream to visit here, and I highly recommend it, whether you love using your imagination or not. These stairs proved to be a notable section of the journey through the citadel. There were no supports outside of the connection at the top and a connection to a slab of concrete at the bottom. Not original to the infrastructure, to be sure. Our last shopping stop of the day was at this little artisan stall run by individuals with some remarkable sewing skills. Here we ordered a personalized apron made with love from Carcassonne. We returned to the Airbnb for a short while and then proceeded to mark off another thing that must be done while visiting here: exploring the city by night. The entire fortification is well lit, as can be seen, and it's on every traveler's mandatory list. By the time we returned for a second round of adventuring in the castle, we had worked up an appetite and searched for a place to eat dinner. We deliberated on if we should enter here or not, as there were all kinds of trappings throughout the corridor, but at last we determined that we could always choose to exit if it didn't prove welcoming. Only it did, and also made the top 5 most memorable dinners list. I had an omelette that French chefs dream of, and my mom had a crêpe au fromage, or cheese crepe, and that was also delicious. Oh, and the baked potato. There's a story there, but sadly not enough time to share it. If you're ever in Carcassonne, you must visit Le Stall des Troubadours. Though we missed watching the light show performance here, it was pretty amazing traversing what felt like a castle all to ourselves that night. Early morning found us shopping at the local market. Here's a bit of a virtual tour for you from the eyes of an American. On your right, you will see the main fruit stand that offers bananas, pomegranates, cantaloupes, and giant grapes of 2 varieties. On this side of the stand, you will find plums, what appear to be apricots, pears, and another few crates of apricot-like specimens. And here's the famous fountain of the square that all people with cameras must get close to. In this section of the market, you will find all varieties of flowers, both giftable and plantable. In a market of this kind, on your left you will find crates of lettuce. There are all kinds of people making their way through the array of stands along with their lapdogs, bicycles, or the iconic European shopping cart, which comes equipped with 2 or 4 wheels and follows you rather than vice versa. I will say that even with this style of cart, the infamous shopper's walking pattern still exists, aka you attempt a subtle left pass and they narrow the gap in a sly weave, making it impossible to squeeze through unnoticed, and also making a dive to the right imperative. Also on our right, we just passed the edible bulb and bulb-like edibles stand offering onions, garlic, lemons, and potatoes. This is the Cliff Notes version of that market. It was full of so many different fresh and beautiful items. We ended up purchasing a jar full of honey here and a handful of these unusual looking fried pastries which we added to breakfast.
Pan au chocolate.
It's actually a chocolatine. It's different.
It's a chocolate what? Chocolatine. And I want to see our lovely.
I don't know what these are.
Wow. Very fun. I have
It's been lovely, Carcassonne. Au revoir.